the Francis Howell School District Board of Education meeting to order. But we're going to begin this evening with a moment of silence. The Board of Education would like to recognize a moment of silence in honor of Mr. Todd Bizzell, Sager teacher and Francis Howell Central football and track coach. He passed away this last week after a long battle with cancer. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mr. Lang. By roll call. Ms. Walker?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. I apologize. We do need to have the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Okay. I apologize. I do have a migraine this evening, so please bear with me if I'm a little fuzzy. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance this evening led by Dr. Lucas Lammers, who is our new Director of Secondary Education.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We do not have any patron comments this evening. FHEA?
Good evening, President Cope, members of the board, Superintendent Hendricks Harris, members of the cabinet. The new school year is quickly approaching. The new teachers will arrive to the district next week. FHEA met with many of them today at our FHEA luncheon. We were able to have some great discussions and with our new teachers and welcome them to the district and to FHEA. They received a bag of supplies that they can use for their classrooms. Kickoff is around the corner, and before we know it, students will be walking through those doors. It saddens us to know that we are starting a new year and still dealing with last year's issues. We have not given up on hope that you will return to the table sooner rather than later to resolve last year's salary discussions. After reviewing tonight's financial statement that were made available today, the district is ending with a $4.5 million in reserves and not $600,000 as forecasted. So we are again asking to go back to the table, and we are available to start tomorrow. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. FISPA?
Good evening, esteemed members of the board and administration. My name is Carl Cracky. I'm a proud Francis Howell custodian for 27 years. And I'm here tonight representing the Francis Howell Education Support Professional Association, FISPA, as new president, thanks to John Davis as our outgoing president. We are looking forward to working together as problem solvers through district committees, labor management, negotiations, and advocacy to continue to help keep Francis Howell an A+ school district for both our students and your awesome support staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. SAA? Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mrs. Lang. By roll call? Mrs. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Next on the agenda is our MSBA board report, which we got a short preview. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of July. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the revitalized State Board of Education. The State Board held its first meeting in 6 months in June after Governor Mike Parson appointed 2 members to the board, giving the board a quorum of 5 members needed to conduct business. Governor Parson appointed Peter Hershend of Branson and Carol Hallquist of Kansas City to the State Board. Hallquist is the founder of a nonprofit organization that matches retired business professionals with urban superintendents, and she's a former executive with Hallmark Cards. Hershend is from Branson and returns to the State Board after having previously served 3 terms as a member. Hershend says he expressed an interest in returning to the State Board of Education.
I was not happy when I was requested to unserve. I guess that's what happens when you go off the board. And why is that? And it's very, very simple, because in my professional experience, I, like everybody in this room, serves in numerous capacities, some large, some small organizations that try to make a difference. I have never in my life, will never in my life, find a position, a job, a responsibility that is more rewarding than the position here on the State Board of Education.
State Board President Charlie Shields says Governor Parson clearly made a functioning State Board of Education a high priority.
And it was very clear to me by his actions, the speed by which he made these appointments, so this board could gain a quorum, that he is committed to the work of this board, and the governor, and I will say the governor because I spoke to the First Lady as well, the governor and First Lady are committed to public education in the state, and the fact that this was his first priority as governor is, I think, shows that commitment.
MSBA Executive Director Melissa Randall issued the following statement on the appointments. We thank Governor Parson for placing such a high priority on appointments to the State Board of Education. The extraordinary experience of the 2 appointees will enable the State Board to resume its responsibilities quickly. We look forward to working with the State Board on policy issues that will have a positive impact on the education being provided to Missouri's 900,000 public school students. Governor Parson now has the opportunity to fill 3 more vacant seats on the State Board of Education in the coming months. One of the issues that stalled while the State Board was unable to meet was the development of the latest version of the Missouri School Improvement Program, or MSIP 6. The State Board received a progress report on MSIP 6 at its June meeting. The Missouri School Improvement Program includes standards used to determine the accreditation status of Missouri school districts. Another issue that was put on hold is the search for a new Commissioner of Education after the removal of Margie Van Dieven as Commissioner in December. It is the responsibility of the State Board of Education to employ the Commissioner. State Board President Charlie Shields says the board is in no hurry to hire a new commissioner because of the solid leadership of interim Commissioner Roger Dorson, but the process does need to resume. Board member Mike Jones says the board needs to be clear about the type of person it wants for the next commissioner.
We should be very explicit about, do we think we need a change in direction, or as a policy body, are we fundamentally satisfied with the direction in which we're going, so that anybody who applies, but also all the stakeholders that have an interest in what we do on this issue, we'll know what our reasoning was going into it.
The state board will be developing the qualities it's seeking in a new commissioner as its first task in the search. School safety remains one of the most critical issues facing school boards throughout Missouri. While our public schools remain among the safest places for our students, school leaders continue to seek ways to ensure our students feel safe and secure so they can focus on learning. School board members, administrators, school resource officers, law enforcement officials, and others gathered last month for the annual Safe Schools and Colleges Conference sponsored by MSBA's Center for Education Safety. Among those attending was Willow Springs School Resource Officer Glenn Moore.
This year it was again about relationships, and the key for me is we always try and build that at our school, but we gave me a different perspective this year. We often do that among our school population, but to gain a broader perspective and influence among the community, not just the parents, but other community members and stakeholders. It really helps if you have a major incident or even something just routine to have those relationships in place and established. So working with not only your board members, but administration and teachers, et cetera, that are here today, that is very good process. It helps build that and spread it exponentially.
The Safe Schools and Colleges Conference included speakers and workshops on a wide range of school safety issues. Be sure to take advantage of the programs and services offered by the Center for Education Safety as you consider safety and security issues in your school district. Registration is now open for the 2018 MSBA Annual Conference. The event is scheduled for September 27th through the 30th at the Lake of the Ozarks, and once again will feature more than 100 breakout sessions and some outstanding keynote speakers, all designed to help board members and administrators improve their leadership skills. You can register for the annual conference through the MSBA website. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Board, next on our agenda under fiscal responsibility is purchases of over $7,500. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mrs. Lane. Roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Motion carried 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the June 2018 preliminary financial statements as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hain, seconded by Mrs. Walker. Mr. Supple.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Crowe. I want to first of all start by apologizing to the board. These were posted late for this meeting. I will share with you that it's always a little bit difficult to do the year-end closings. There are a lot of one-time processes that we need to do, and it takes a little bit more time than usual. Typically, the statements aren't usually done until much later in the month, and we have in the past taken a look at both July and August statements, or June and July, August statements at the August meeting. But I thought that given that, I would review just some of the highlights for the board, because I know you had a very short period of time to look at the statements. So on the revenue side, a couple things that I wanted to point out. Our revenue overall was about a little over 1% higher than budgeted. And so the big three that we deal with all the time are our taxes, our basic state aid, and our sales tax. And so if you take a look at current and delinquent taxes together, that was about 0.6% higher than what was budgeted. Our basic state aid was just a little bit higher than budgeted, and our sales tax was just a little bit higher than budgeted. So no real big differences there. I did bring up again the financial institutions tax, just a reminder that that's part of the story that we tell this year. And there was $1.6 million more than what we had budgeted for that line item. As I've shared with the board previously, that is a singular event, not likely to be repeated. On the federal revenue side, our overall revenue was about 2.4% lower than what was budgeted. A couple things there. The federal fiscal year is different than Francis Howell's fiscal year, which creates some timing issues in terms of when we make application for reimbursement and when we receive it. So we're not very concerned about that. There is the opportunity to carry over funds that were allocated for our use. And so if they're not available to us in one fiscal year, we have the opportunity to use them in another fiscal year. All of the federal funds, of course, are targeted on very specific programs, so they aren't available for general use, but support very specific initiatives as defined by the various entitlement program. On the expenditure side, we also have three big movers of our story, and that is salaries, benefits, and transportation. Salaries were about a little over 1.1% lower than what was budgeted. Our benefits were about 1.7% lower than what was budgeted, but our transportation expenses were about 1.9% higher than what was budgeted. The big movers in the expenditure side are purchase services. We came in just over 4% lower than what was budgeted, and supplies were about 7% lower than what was budgeted. And those are areas where we have a lot more discretion over the items that are paid out. You know, salaries are contractually arranged, and so you have a pretty good idea of what's happening there. The same with benefits, and of course transportation or system is in place. But there are a lot more moving parts with purchase services and supplies, and we typically see this level of underspending in those areas. So I do want to share information that I shared with the board previously. We had an opportunity to have this conversation in May when we did the budget work session, but also we had an opportunity to have some preliminary conversation about this when we provided a financial overview as part of our negotiations discussions. So if we take a look at the chart here, the blue column shows the budget for this year as of June 30th. So we are constantly making amendments to the budget. So it moves and changes a little bit. So these numbers in the blue column are not exactly the same as they were when we had this conversation at the May meeting, but for all intents and purposes, they are the actual budget that we have as of June 30th. The pink column there, it shows what the forecast is. And so these are the numbers that I shared with the board when we had our conversation about the budget for fiscal year 19 at the budget work session in May. And at that time, my forecast for this year was showing that we would have a $5.6 million surplus of revenue over expense. And so as you can see, the fiscal year budget in the blue column, we were projecting a small deficit. And again, I would remind the board that when we had this conversation earlier in April, that was showing a $600,000 surplus, but some budget adjustments that were made since that time caused that to change. But again, the surplus that was projected in May when we had our budget work session was $5.6 million. The actual budget surplus ended up being $4.6 million. And so we've talked about this before, but this is a graphic way of showing you how this works, that there are some very big numbers, but they're relatively small percentages of what we're doing. So our revenue was projected to be about 1.6% higher than budgeted. We actually came in about 1% higher than budgeted. And our expenditures were projected to be almost 2% lower than budgeted, and we came in right at 2% lower than budgeted. Now, because we had that unusual situation with the financial institutions tax, I thought this was maybe a more accurate way to reflect our actual results. And so the first couple columns are exactly the same. The green column is what has been changed, and it just shows we backed out the financial institutions tax. And so here we're showing that without the financial institution tax in that calculation, our revenue was right on where we had budgeted. So just about 1/10 of 1% higher than what was budgeted. And then the expenditure pattern is the same here. So I just wanted to just give that brief overview. I think those are the high points. Our results at year end are very, very close to what we showed the board we would have when we had that conversation in May at the budget work session. Just a little bit, maybe it was a little bit optimistic in the forecast. We came in just a little bit below that, but fairly typical with a small swing in either direction on both revenue and expense.
Board, any questions, comments? Kevin, I'd like to thank you and your team. I know since I've been on the board, you have always been within about 2 to 2.5%. And so with so many moving parts, I just really appreciate the time that you and your team put into our forecast and tracking our expenses. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hain, did you have a question? No. Anyone else?
Thank you very much, Mr. Supple. By roll call?
Voting by roll call?
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Board, I entertain a motion to approve the additional certified and non-certified positions as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mr. Hain. Mrs. Simpkins, did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. I would just say that these positions align very well with the new strategic plan that the district is implementing. And the positions at Francis Howell North will allow us to provide some support to that building in some areas where they have seen some struggles. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have regarding those positions.
Board, any questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Tiglich?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, next on our agenda is the policy review. It is a first reading of several policies, so please make sure you take the time to review those. I noticed that many of them did not have any changes, so those are a little easier to review. We'll now drop down to our work session to go over behavioral and mental health supports.
You got more hiding in the closet or something. We shoot a video with them later.
Okay, so tonight, board, for our work session, we have a presentation on behavior and mental health supports. Dr. Harris.
Yeah, so I wanted to take an opportunity tonight to have a discussion with the board. I know that we had some conversation at retreat about some needs. In the summertime, it's a great time for us to sit back and reflect and think about what we need. On June 26th, we invited administrators from all of the elementary schools in because, as you know, there has been a lot of stress regarding student behaviors at elementary. So we had some very fruitful conversations and came up with some recommendations. And I just want to share a little bit of background about how we got to where we are and then discuss some needs that I believe we have moving forward for this school year. So this slide isn't new to you. This was a strategic planning slide. It is not a Francis Howell issue. Nationally, mental health disorders are on the rise, and it's very difficult to get treatment. So you can see there a variety of mental health diagnoses and the percentages. And those are for students, or for children ages 3 through 17. This is a slide that we developed for this presentation, and just to see the increase from 1981 when we were talking about 7% to 2001 when we were talking about 19%, and then most recently in 2013, 33% of school-aged children, their parents were reporting had a diagnosis of mental health problem. So it is on the rise. I think that because we live it every day, we think it is a Francis Howell issue, and you can talk to anyone in any district and they will share the same concerns that we have right now. We are a part of a national consortium. There's about 30 districts involved, and the superintendents identified their two greatest issues for the consortium to research and to help develop models. And all 30 of those districts have said, we need you to study social and emotional supports, specifically at the elementary age. So we've been working with them on developing their research. In addition to mental health issues, we also know the school shootings are on the rise, and after Sandy Hook, more than 400 people were shot in over 200 school shootings. Just last week, I believe it was, there was a recommendation to the Federal School Safety Commission in regards to how are we going to stop school shootings, and their number one recommendation is increasing access to mental health services. So I think we tend to be, and I know we've had a lot of conversation with the board about safety and reactionary, and we're doing everything we can in regards to getting our crisis plans in place, but the proactive piece is as important, if not more so, than that reactive piece that we talk so much about. Just a little background in our district. There was a task force in 2013 after Sandy Hook, and one of the things that they recommended that we haven't implemented yet is educational support counselors at every school. The other thing is I was able to take some look at data in preparation for this meeting, and one of the things that struck me is that our workman's comp injuries related to student acting out have doubled. And so you can imagine, so we went from 60 to 120. We were solid at 60, like it was 60-60 in several years, and then just the increase to this past year when we have been at 120. And one of the things that struck me as I was looking at that data is those are workman's comp injuries, and I'm here to tell you that Kevin needs to shut his ears, but not everybody who is injured is reporting it as a workman's comp issue. And so you can imagine that we have teachers maybe with what they consider minor injuries or paras who are not going through the workman's comp process, but have also had to deal with physical acting out and injuries, although they might be minor, in regards to our students. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about middle school students specifically and what causes us concern. We did see about a 32% increase in out of school. So we looked at the lowest year, which was 14-15, and our current year, and that's where we're at, a 32% increase of students being out of school suspensions. And we know that out of school suspensions are not good for the kids who are being suspended. That is being out of school, being out of structure, sometimes being in an environment that isn't supportive of their mental health is not a good thing. And we also know that we don't want to have behaviors that lead to those incidents in our schools. And then when we were looking at surveys this past year, one of the things that is a little concerning is that 19% of middle school students report, so we're almost at 20% now, that they don't feel safe in school. That's a Francis Howell statistic. And then one of the items that Dr. Patterson has brought to the forefront as we had this conversation is just the concerns of the middle school level Every other year, we do a Missouri student survey that assesses many things, but one of their sets of questions has to do with suicide and depression indicators. And you can see there, again, those numbers are alarming. If you look at the percentage of our middle school students that report that they attempted suicide, not thought about it, not planned it, but they actually attempted it, varies from 2% to 8%, but if you look right there in the middle, we're at about 6% of kids doing that. And even just something as students feeling very sad, we have, in most of our middle schools, over 20% of our kids are reporting feeling very sad. So the latest survey results are concerning. If we look at elementary, we do our best not to put our elementary students on an out-of-school suspension. So it doesn't make sense to them. It's not something that is effective with the students. If you're a first grade student, you don't know why you run out of school, and you might enjoy the out-of-school experience. So we have really been focusing on cutting it back on our out-of-school suspensions at elementary. But one of the things we can track is office discipline referrals. So just because they might not be a result of an out-of-school suspension, doesn't mean that office discipline referrals aren't increased. So you can see that we have seen a 46% increase in office discipline referrals related to aggressive and defiant behavior. And that, again, was compared to our lowest year since we were tracking. We have about 6% of our elementary students that feel that they don't feel safe at school, and last school year, we had 2,000 referrals in our elementary schools alone. So I thought I would take a moment just to summarize some supports that we have put in place, because it is not like we are not doing nothing. We have done many things in attempts to support. So last year, we added educational support counselors at the elementary, and we already had them at the high schools. We anticipated being able to use Kreider for the middle schools, and what our middle school folks would tell you is that has been more difficult than we anticipated. It's just not working out. They have a very targeted audience and some bureaucracy that we have to work through in order to access those services, and those services are not easily accessible at middle school. We did put an Inspire team in place for this year to work with different buildings throughout the district on their most intense kids. It took a while for us to get that off the ground, but when we met with the elementary principals, they feel like that is on track and it is good support. We have a team of people for 10 elementary schools, though, so. Their biggest concern was that they don't have that regular support of the Inspire team, primarily because there's just not enough Inspire team to go around. But they were all very appreciative, and those that have worked with the Inspire team felt like it was very helpful in regards to working with their students. We have, I'm listening for weather alarms. We have provided intense training over the course of the past couple of years, and I think Francis Hall is getting to be known as a hub for some of these things, and we continue to work on it. We spent much time with our administrators over the summer trying to weed through and prioritizing what supports and what training each of the staffs need. They are all in different places, and it was getting a little messy in that we were trying to work on so many things in every building. So we have really tried to filter and narrow down to what's the training that's going to take your building to the next place. But overall in our district, we have a fair amount of people who have been trained in non-crisis prevention interventions, or what we sometimes call NCPI, and especially the de-escalation techniques that accompany that, so that we actually offer something lesser than the large training that just focuses on de-escalation techniques for our staff. Now, you've heard us talking, and you've seen best practices on trauma-informed schools as well as the sanctuary model. We do think those trainings and those models hold out hope for our most difficult, our most emotionally challenged kids, and we think we're on the right track. We're gaining some momentum, but we're not there yet. One of the things Dr. Vanderpool did was he reallocated a special education coordinator position to a mental health coordinator. So we have Sherry McGeisha, who this is her area of expertise, and this is what she knows and what she can do, and she's full-time with us and is able to provide some consultation and some oversight of the services that we have and the supports we've put in place. And then tonight you also approved a consultation with Dr. Cox, who makes himself available for the most intense cases in regards to consulting and things like working through some threat assessments and things along those lines. So this is our current ESC breakdown, and you can see the disparity when you think of the number of buildings that we have. The bottom line here is that we do not have an ESC at every middle school. So with the increase in mental health concerns, we're concerned that we don't have that mental health professional in every building. Again, last year you put them in place at elementary. We're unable to fill that gap at middle school right now. What we're finding is that we have some kids who need that person at middle school. They had it at elementary, they're moving to middle school, they don't have it anymore. So in addition to just having needs, not just transition needs, but needs in middle school. So here's what we want to talk about tonight is our requests. We attempted to do status quo staffing as best we could for the school year. We took some time over the summer to reflect and not think about things we want, but things we need. We say in Francis Howell all the time, safety is our #1 priority, and after much discussion and debate, we are requesting these additional positions. So you can see that we're asking for 3.5 educational support counselors that would finish off our middle schools. They would have ESCs at every middle school. We're finding it a challenge, or Mr. Armour at Daniel Boone reports it's a challenge to have a part-time ESC. So a kid who might be having a mental health crisis can't schedule that when the ESC is there. So he's finding that to be quite the challenge. And then we're working through exactly what it would look like, but we would like to add 10 behavior support assistants. Those would be placed at every elementary school. The conversations we have had with our elementary principals is that there would be some sort of recovery room. And it could be that a kid needs it for 20 minutes, and it could be that if we put this student back in class tomorrow, we can anticipate they're not going to be successful, so we're going to put them in the recovery room until we can develop a plan. I would like for every building to play around with what they think is going to work with in their context, given how they currently have things set up. So I don't know that we're going to go with, here is the model, you have to use it this way. I think most of them will use it in the manner that I just described, but some of them have some other ideas about some things that they would like to try. And so I think for this coming year, to look at, whatever model they think is best in regards to these behavior support positions. We would be providing these people extensive training. You heard me talk about the Inspire team. They are able to provide training and expertise, and they would provide that to this group. These positions would be, I'm going to have to divert to Lisa, level.
For the support staff positions, we are considering adding these positions to our support staff salary schedule. So they would be around a pay grade 15 to 17, which would allow us to really focus on getting some high quality candidates in that position. And we would expect that they would have some of that experience working with students that have some of those behaviors already as we do that recruiting.
So it is a total of 13.5 positions in regards to addressing the concerns that we have. Again, I don't think this is something that is positions that would be nice to have or necessarily even moving us forward in our strategic plan. This is about school safety and functioning on a day-to-day basis in our buildings. So what questions do you have?
Lisa, how are we doing on our contingency positions right now?
With our support staff positions, we have around a 5.0 FTE, but we are still in those stages where we're seeing enrollment grow in some of our elementary buildings and just kind of watching those numbers come forward. Whenever we have a request for some additional staffing, we look at those ratios. So we see some need sometimes at Warren or Fairmont, and it comes in the way of some recess paras or some cafeteria aides, or maybe some secretarial support. So we're watching that very closely.
But right now, you're not finished there for this next.
We're not finished there yet.
Okay, thank you.
And certified staff?
Certified staff, we have less than a 1.0 FTE remaining. So a lot of times the contingency staffing that the board approves during the staffing plan is used so that we can not do a reduction in force as we go through the staffing plan. We might have a teacher on the waiting assignment list for a 0.17 or a 0.33, and we will look to utilize that teacher in some fashion that meets the needs of a building, and we'll use some contingency staffing to do that so that we're not asking the board to do some sort of a reduction in staff, and that way our teachers feel that consistency with their employment from year to year. We also utilize a lot of that contingency staffing when it comes to traveling, so when schedules don't fit very well and we're asking a teacher to travel from one building to another, we'll use that contingency to pay for that travel. Or we might buy a plan time in order to make a master schedule work at the middle school or high school level, so we'll utilize that contingency first. So while we haven't, we've added one position, I believe, in certified staff so far. We're still watching our elementary numbers. We're pulling enrollment numbers every Monday and watching those class sizes in elementary. But so far, we feel pretty comfortable that we're gonna be in a good spot.
And so if we look at these extra positions, that would put one ESC and one support assistant at each elementary building?
We currently do have one ESC in every elementary building.
Right.
And so this would be another person on that could support that.
Except Daniel Boone, right? Because you said Daniel Boone is only part-time.
Right. They have a half-time ESC at Daniel Boone, and so this would increase that to a full-time
Full-time,
ESC
okay.
in that building.
Yes, so everybody would have a full-time ESC.
Okay.
And,
Mr. Rainey?
yeah, I know that you had said that the Inspire program that we put in place, it seems like that's catching hold and we're making some progress with that, but the gist of it is there weren't enough of them, or it wasn't. Is there a need to increase that Inspire program some so that we can actually get ahead of this, or, you know, maybe make a significant impact? Because I believe that all these things here are gonna make each school a better place to learn, a better place to work, and a better place to teach, because, you know, it's gonna be good, it's a win-win-win by doing this, so that the schools can function, because a lot of our schools are, you know, having some difficulty from time to time.
So one of the things we talked about with what I call the behavior think tank when we had elementary principals in to talk about the issues, we had talked about this might be something we attempt in the short term and see how it goes. I don't know how this will go and how much help and support this will be able to provide us. And we might be at a place where we are looking at a year from now, coming up with a cert and a support staff position to address children with challenging behaviors. But didn't feel like we could move that forward just yet. Depending on the building, I think we're really gonna have to wait and see how this plays out. So there's price tag. There's price tag with everything. Each group of these positions will be over $200,000 for a total of almost a little over $500,000.
That would include salary and benefits for those full-time positions.
I think I gave you a lower number for those behavior support assistants that were trained. I don't know that I added benefits.
Would we anticipate being able to fill these positions prior to the start of the school year? I mean, we're in kind of time crunch.
We, with the work session today, if the board gives us permission to move forward, we'll bring back a recommendation to add the positions to staffing at the August board meeting. And then we would post those positions shortly after that board meeting and begin to look to fill those positions. So we may not have them in place for the start of the school year with the timing that we have now, but we would get them shortly thereafter.
So with the price tag of around $500,000, that's 13 and a half FTEs, right?
Remember, the support staff FTEs are not a 1.0 per position.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it'll be a little bit different as we come forward. It's a full-time ESC is a 0.63. And a support staff position is the same, about a 0.63 if they work about 184 days is what I think a paraprofessional would work if it was similar to that, or a support staff person working with students. So around 184. So when we do that FTE calculation for the non-certified side, it's not a 1.0 for one person. So it'll be a little less than that.
Thank you. I think just in the environment that we have today, it's so important for the safety of all of our students and making sure that our students that are going through some challenging times are getting the support they need. So I feel that this is a need, not a want. I think it's a need.
Yeah, and I would just add in elementary, we take many calls a year and hear many teacher concerns that it's not just a concern for the student who is in crisis, but for all of the students. And I do think this is going to give us an opportunity to maybe not send that kid back to class when they aren't ready, and not have so many lines outside of the principal's offices and just be screwing kids back to classes. So really be able to give some staff, some of the other students, the student, some time not in that environment. We don't see these as being holding classrooms that are going to turn into long-term placements with a kid in there day after day after day for long periods of time. But again, we're going to play around with it and see what we can come up with in regards to a more formal model moving forward.
Looking forward to what you talked a lot about the elementary, but the slides you showed us talked a lot about the middle schools, and I know by increasing the support counselors in the middle schools will help. Are you looking at that, maybe seeing how this works in the elementary schools? Because being a middle school person in the past, I could see where that would be a real beneficial too, because some of those kids will not be ready to go back to the classroom right away, and that's when the behaviors tend to escalate higher. Is that something that you're going to be keeping in mind to look towards the middle school also?
Yeah, I think we'll have to keep an eye on mental health supports in general in our district. What we saw at one point was early childhood having grave concerns, and then elementary. Middle school certainly has concerns, but as you know, middle school student acting out looks very different than a first grade student acting out. And so the frequency isn't there, the intensity is greater, the frequency is not usually what we're seeing at the elementary buildings.
I think though with those numbers that we're seeing with the committing that suicide, the feeling very sad, I just think that we really need to look at that group too. And I know that sometimes middle school kids really need a lot of extra support, even though we tend to forget that.
Yeah, and I'll just add that Goal 2 of our strategic plan does talk about social emotional learning. We need to get some, not just staffing in place, but some systems and some programs in place to support all of our students. So things like social emotional curriculums and mental health screeners for all of our kids. So those are things that Goal 2 group will start to look at and make recommendations moving forward. Maybe a little down the road, but.
It's just, I have a special place in my heart for those middle school kids, and I just want to make sure we take really good care. Thank you.
You're talking to a former middle school ED teacher.
I know.
Board, any other questions, comments? Great. I look forward to the recommendation on the next agenda.
We'll bring it back to staff next month.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is superintendent comments.
So a lot has occurred since our last meeting. July 9th through the 12th, we had over 200 teachers attend a 4-day training in Lucy Coffin's writing, a reading. I have received many positive comments from participants. Some reporting this training has changed their professional lives. I know the board has received some positive feedback as well. I want to specifically celebrate Carrie Hepburn, our elementary ELA content leader. If you know Carrie, you know she's a driven leader that just doesn't give up, and it took a lot to pull off this institute. While the Teachers College provides quality professional development, working within their parameters has been a challenge. So I want to thank her and all those involved. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education announced the 18-19 Regional Teachers of the Year as part of the Missouri Teacher of the Year program. Committees comprised of peers and key stakeholders for the RPDCs in all the areas selected Regional Teachers of the Year who are now eligible for the 2019 Missouri Teacher of the Year award. Shelley Parks has earned that regional recognition. If you know Shelley, you know she's an amazing person and a teacher, and we are excited that she has been recognized throughout this process. Alea Atum from Francis Hall North was one of 6 Francis Hall students at the Lewis and Clark Center to travel to Louisville, Kentucky for the Skills USA 54th Annual National Leadership and Skills Conference, the world's largest showcase of skill trains and skill competitions, where she placed first nationally in the prepared speech competition. Wow. Two other Howell students competed. Mason Aguilar from Francis Hall Central finished 11th in the nation in power equipment technology, And Luke Davis from Francis Hall North finished 16th in the nation in medical terminology. Congratulations to Laura Almond on being the first Francis House Central student selected to participate in the 2018 NAFNE All National Symphony Orchestra. She was selected from an extremely talented group of students across the United States, and she is one of only a handful of French horns in this year's ensemble. This week we had all of our administrators in for 2 days of retreat and training. Topics included a review of the strategic plan, safety, legal updates, training on our evaluation system, and training on having tough conversations. Our administration worked hard and were intensely focused. Thanks to all who played a role, but a special thanks to Connie Buckman, who was strategic and thoughtful in planning this event, and also to Jenny Meserly, her administrative assistant, who attended to every detail. It was a great few days. Just a reminder, in August, catch that? Just as a reminder, in August, as the new school year starts, we're going to be changing the time and sequence of events of the board meetings. So we will begin closed session at 5:30 and begin public meetings with the workshop. So this part that we do at the end is going to get bumped up to the top of the agenda and we'll start at 6. The business meetings will immediately follow. And I think, as you know, we can anticipate potentially having to go back into closed on a more regular basis. So 30 minutes doesn't usually cut it for closed. As Anita mentioned, our new teachers will begin work next week. We are excited to meet them and to have them in for training. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce a few new faces in the crowd that you've heard so much about. Dr. Nathan Hoven is our new Chief Academic Officer. He comes to us as previously from the Chief Human Resource Officer position in Wentzville. Welcome. And most of you already know Luke Slamers. He led us in the pledge so well this evening. And he's the new Director of School Group at secondary level.
For next on our agenda, we added in Board of Education comments. So everyone knows, the board has an offsite every year. Contrary to some of the social posts, it's not in the Caribbean. It is just here locally. We met at Independence Library this year, media area. So at that meeting, we had talked about rearranging our board meeting, as Dr. Hendricks just discussed, to be able to put our work session more towards the beginning of the meeting, which we're going to try that out starting in our next meeting. We've also added in some Board of Education comment time, so that at this time, board, if you have anything particularly that you'd like to speak about, you can certainly go around the table.
So the only thing I wanted to say is I got a chance to meet with the principal that is starting at Hall North, and he is fantastic. So very excited about that. There is a Meet the Administrator for the entire community, July 30th at 6 p.m. So I would encourage anybody that has an interest to come out and meet him. He's a pretty great guy.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't really have anything tonight.
Nope.
Seem good?
I'm good.
You're good?
Good.
Okay, great. All right, board, let's take a look at our Board of Education requests. Is there any agenda items that the board would like to have discussed? Okay, looks like we're good there for now. Let's take a look at our August 16th meeting to see if there's any adjustments that need to be made. We have staffing on there, so we're good there. Good. Any other additions, corrections, adjustments? Okay. Let's take a look at our September 20th meeting. That meeting should be after our attendance at MSBA conference.
I think it's before.
Oh, it's before? We're going after that, thank you. So it'll be the following meeting. Okay, I'll bring it up later then. Any other additions? Good? All right. Board, I'll entertain motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved?
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, second by Mrs. Stiglitz, by roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Thank you all.